Hello and welcome to today's web seminar, Maximize Your Test Coverage Throughout the DevOps Pipeline, sponsored by Perfecto and featuring Eran Kinsbrenner, Mobile Evangelist at Perfecto, and Uzi Alon, Director of Technology at Perfecto. I'm your host and moderator, Josiah Renaudin. Thank you for joining us today. Before I hand it off to the speakers, let me explain the controls on this console. If you experience any technical issues, please send a note through the question field located beneath the panels. We'll be on hand to help as quickly as possible. Our responses can be read in the Q&A panel to the left of the slides. This is also the same way to submit questions. We welcome all comments and inquiries during today's event, so feel free to ask as many as you'd like, and we'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. This event contains a live demo, as well as a polling question. To optimize your bandwidth for the best viewing experience possible, please be sure to close out any unnecessary applications that may be running in the background. At the bottom of your console is a widget toolbar. These widgets open panels. The console opens with 3 on your screen: the speaker, Q&A, and the slide panels. All of these panels can be moved around and resized to your liking. If you accidentally close one, click the respective widget to reopen the panel in its original place. Hover your cursor over these icons to reveal labels identifying each widget. Through these icons, you can download the speaker's slides and white papers, as well as share this event with friends and colleagues. This event is being recorded and made available for on-demand viewing. Once the recording is ready, you receive an email with instructions how to access the presentation and slides on demand. With that said, I'd like to introduce and pass controls to our first speaker, Eran.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. As Josh mentioned, my name is Eran Kinsbrenner. I'm joined here by Uzi Alon, CTO, Perfecto. And today's webinar, we want to discuss one of the, I would say, biggest challenges in today's DevOps maturity, and that's setting up the proper test lab that can fit throughout the entire DevOps pipeline from development through production. Before I start, I would just like to introduce the agenda for today. We will start by diving into Factors. Factors is Perfecto's reference guide for test coverage for both mobile and web. We'll explain the Factors guide and how to read it. Then we'll dive into the most important topic for today, and that's the coverage within the DevOps process, and that will be split into 2. We'll cover which platforms, web and mobile, but also which tools are best fit to use throughout the DevOps pipeline. We'll do, I think we do the 4 different demos today, demonstrating few tools, but each tool will serve a different purpose throughout the development and testing process for both mobile and web. So we've got very cool content, and I think it's a very hot topic. Hi, Uzi.
Hi, everyone. What I like today in today's topics that we are not going to talk about one test, one technology, but we are going to talk about the pipeline. And the pipeline is a process, how to take the code that I'm writing and release it. And when I release it, how to make sure that it works, how to make sure that the quality is high, how to make sure that it works on all the devices. But before we'll start to dive into the pipeline, let's start to define what are the right platforms that I need to test my application on.
Sure. So for that, Uzi, what Perfecto has been doing for the last, I think, 3 years is developing the Factors magazine. That's the reference guide that, as of today, with the 9th edition that was released, covers 16 different geographies. We are providing recommendations for testing both mobile and web across EMEA, countries like Germany, UK, Switzerland, the Nordics, which was just added, US, Canada, Australia, and different regions as well. So we are covering almost the entire world and trying to give guidance based on usage patterns and best practices in testing against which platforms you should be developing as well as testing your applications. We are going to drill into, in the first part of the webinar, into what's the right coverage strategy, which platforms, and how you should set up your basic device and desktop browser lab. And then as this slide shows, we'll talk about how this coverage fits in your DevOps pipeline. So when you talk about coverage, that's what Perfecto believes that's the right coverage cube or the principle around test coverage. And the idea behind this cube is that you don't have just the devices or the test cases, you also have the environments, which represents the user conditions. So to get maximum test coverage, either for your web or mobile application testing, you need to have, for one end, the right amount of test cases. The test automation code needs to cover all the right user flows. That's the left axis. Then you have the right platform coverage. And if you have blind spots, you're not covering the right devices, operating systems, or desktop browsers, you are taking UX risks. And if you're covering them, but you're not really covering the user conditions, and the user conditions can include different networks, different applications that are running in the background, rotations, and different orientation, then obviously you're not maximizing your test coverage and you're exposing your application to environmental impact or defects.
So I would like to add something about the third dimension, the user condition. Not a lot of people think about how important it is. Yes, to test it on a different screen size, that's obvious. To test it on, to run different test cases, that's obvious. But what is so important about the user condition? I'll give you an example. So one of our customers ran all of their tests during in a lab, and it was connected to Wi-Fi. Everything was okay. The reports were green, and they released the application. And the moment that they released the application, they started to get a lot of very bad review in the market regarding the usage. And what the screenshots that have been uploaded is cannot connect to the server. And after we start to work with them and to try to understand what was the missing link in their test, we found that they never execute the network. Most of their users use in a specific, during their traveling, they need to check something in this application, so they do it when they're traveling and they have a bad network. We saw that they have around 5% packet loss. So what we did, we took the same set of tests that they executed on all of the devices, and we changed the network and add 5% packet loss. And suddenly we found that they had 30% errors in the connection. And the problem with the 30% error is that it does not affect just 30% of the user. It affects all of your user every 3 times that it opened the application.
Wow.
And this is why the user condition is very important, and you cannot drop it when you're running your own coverage. Another important thing here is about the pipeline. You have to remember, and that's something that we are seeing right now. People know how to create tests. They know how to execute the test. But now what they need to do is to do it automatically. They need to add end-to-end automation process. They need to be able to make sure that when the automation process is ended, the quality is actually known. They know that the report reflects the quality. And these dimensions, together with the screen size, give the full picture.
And Uzi, I don't know if this is part of your demo, but getting this kind of quality visibility or insights through reports, either through HAR file, this is something that we are seeing huge adoption over the past couple of months because of the user experience importance, the security, and other aspects, mostly non-functional aspects. So are you going to touch HAR file later on?
Yes, of course. So
okay.
That will be part of the demo.
So I think HAR file kind of falls here in the user condition monitoring or in the non-functional testing visibility. So we'll touch it later. So now that we have covered the 3 dimensions of testing, you have the test cases, you have the platforms, whether they are mobile or desktop web, and you have the user conditions. So let's see an additional layer, and we'll soon show you an example. So when you're talking about coverage, and Uzi talked a bit about the different screen size and resolution, I think that even though it's obvious that you want to make sure that you're covering the right amount of devices against the right amount of screen sizes and resolution, we have divided or created a map in the latest factors to simply classify the different sizes of screens into 4 buckets: small, medium, large, and extra large. And that's what you're seeing here. And what we are seeing is that even if your app is responsive, or if it's not responsive, if it's a native app, we see different and weird issues that either occur when you're switching to a different screen size or resolution, when you are changing orientation, or when you're testing against an emulator and then you are moving to a real device. So we see a huge variance between the test results or defect identification when you are switching across these 4 dimensions, 4 buckets. And I think that I have in the next slide a real example, just a recent one. I think, Uzi, you found this bug, right?
Yeah, so one very important thing about the issue is that sometimes it's going to affect the users that want to buy more than 5 or 6 tickets here. So in this case, they will not be able to use the application. Think how much it's going to affect the business. So these kind of issues are critical to the business because it's actually make our user unhappy, make the user not using our application. In this case, maybe they need to call the call center, maybe they are not going to buy the ticket, and it's going to affect actually the business. And we also can talk a little bit about the brand. So today, the digital facing of the enterprise is actually reflects on the brand.
Yeah.
And if the brand is not good, there is some issue. Even in the latest ads right now, I can hear that insurance company and banks, they are not just advertise their services. They advertise their technology and the digital. The digital becomes very important. For example, Geico said, we have the best application in the mobile 3 years in a row, which means that right now the digital experience become very important asset of your company. And what you need to do is to make sure that it works and all of your customers will be able to use it. And one more point here that you have to remember, you are not controlling your customer devices. The variety of the devices is used. Different users run and buy different devices. I had a meeting last week with a big bank, and I told them, why do you test on Android 4.2? And they told me, and that's something that I was it was very surprising for me to hear, that there is more than 17% of the users use Android 4.2.
Yep.
So they're still using and have to test on very old devices because it's related to a lot of customers, of their customers. So that's something that you have to remember. When you test your application, think about your user. And they're using old devices together with new devices. They're using big screens and small screens. So how do I know which devices should I use in my testing?
Before we drill into that, I just want to say a comment about this slide. This example shows a visual bug on a Google Pixel compared to iPhone 6s. So these are like kind of closed devices from screen size and resolution. Imagine that you put near these devices tablets, desktop browsers, smaller device screens. You will see a very different user experience. And as Uzi mentioned, today the brands are not representing a bank. They're representing a technology company. Banks today want to be positioned as a technology innovators, and this definitely is not a good example for them. So thanks for that cool bug, Uzi. And let's drill down into the actual factors. This is a snapshot taken from the latest edition, reflecting on the usage. This is just for the US. As mentioned, we are covering 16 geographies. And here you can see just the top 10 devices most used in the US in Q1. And you can see that the Galaxy S8, by the way, it's a new device, right? But it is representing a large amount of usage in the US, but it's not, by the way, just in the US. We see it all over the world, in Germany, in Europe. So definitely Samsung is obviously the #1 Android device in the market. It's not enough for you. If you are testing, and going back to the previous example from Uzi, what you can see here, the Samsung S8 compared to the previous device, Samsung S7, are kind of divided between two screen size resolution families. The S7 falls under the medium family, while the S8 under the large. We see the different screen sizes here. So I wonder if in the previous demo we'll take the Samsung S7, the S8, and maybe the previous one, the previous generation, the S6, we might see different UI, different user experience, and this is the importance, and this is what we are trying to achieve with this reference guide. We're trying to get you the maximum coverage across different screen sizes and families, as well as resolutions.
So, Eran, I have a question. You mentioned different geographies.
Yeah.
How big are the differences between the geographies?
Oh, that's huge. We are covering in these factors, Australia and Brazil and China and India. This, as you go east, you see that the Android platform, is like 90% of the market. It dominates the market. And when it dominates, you start to see not just Samsung. You start to see Xiaomi and Huawei and Lenovo and some other brands that are not typically seen in the US, and they have different hardware, different screen sizes, resolution, processor, chipsets, GPU power, different parameters or characteristics, which obviously impact not just the look and feel, but also the performance of the application on the running device. So definitely the geography, this is why we divided factors across the globe to get the audience the maximum coverage in a global view.
So this is a good point. So you have to remember, when you are planning your test, planning your coverage, think about your customer. Where do they locate it? What are the devices that they are using? What are the experience that you want them to have?
Demographics.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, if you look at this table, you not only see, the middle columns which reflect the screen parameters, we also see the release dates, and that's very important. When you're looking at the release dates, you see new devices versus legacy devices. And why is that important to get the coverage? As Uzi mentioned, right? You visited last week a customer who is still running on Android 4.2, right? Today the market in Android is divided into 4 to 5 operating system families, right? Starting to Android 5, 6, 7, 8, and oh, by the way, Android 9 is now in dev preview. So we are not catching up with the latest Android, and there is a new one just around the corner. And iOS is also complex. You have 3 operating system families. You have devices which are quite popular that are still stuck on iOS 9.3.5. You have another bucket of devices stuck on iOS 10.3.3.
Another thing important in iOS, now we have more and more screen resolution and sizes in iOS. That's something that wasn't that popular like 2-3 years ago.
Look at the iPhone X, right? With the screen notch and the Face ID, it's not just the screen size and resolution, it's also the supported features. So logging in today, if you're talking about test coverage, not just about platform coverage, you see new phones actually disrupting your test automation. And we'll touch about it later on, right? If you want to log in today to an iPhone 7 or an iPhone 8 compared to an iPhone X, you have totally different methods to log in. Fingerprint versus Face ID. It's a different test to do, okay? So we're talking about the operating system. We talked about the legacy. We talked about the screen. We talked about geography. This is just few of the parameters that you want to acknowledge and take into account when you're looking at mobile test coverage. Then, to get actually the real meat, if you actually want to know what is required to get the essential coverage across the different geographies, from a math and research that we have done over the last couple of years, Perfecto invested a lot of time, money, resources, engagement with customers, enterprises, to get to this very clear and precise recommendation. To get essential test coverage, you at least need the top 10 devices in each geography. If you support multiple geographies, do the merge between these geographies, you'll find some overlaps. But around 10 devices, that's what we see, covers the basic usage or the highest usage in a given geography.
I want to add one comment about Perfecto Cloud here.
Yeah, sure.
So Perfecto Cloud allows you to have one cloud with devices in all of the different areas. and in all of the different geography. Why it's so important? Think about your regression execution. When you run your regression execution, you want to run it on all the different devices, on the different geographies, and at the end, what you want to do is to have one reporting system which allows you to understand and to analyze all of your execution and to make sure that you have the right picture or the right version quality picture in one place. So one lab contains everything, different devices, different resolution, different web desktop, different location, different wind tunnel parameters, and everything together merge into one big summary report.
Cool. So as mentioned, so we talked about the essential top 10 devices. That's not enough. And why it's not enough? Because it will give you the bare minimum of devices and operating systems. However, you have more than just the latest operating system and the latest beta version to test. You want to test on the latest. You want to test about on the latest -1 and -2 if you're on iOS. If you want to test on the Android, you sometimes need 4 different OS combinations. I already passed, the number 10 devices here because I'm also including tablets. Tablets are very important, especially in the enterprises. Tablets are accounted for significant usage, and tablets are less frequently updated by the end users. So you're finding yourself trying to also test for the latest tablets because you want to be ahead of the market, but you want to cover the usage of your end users, and these are kind of legacy. So you're finding yourself mixing legacy tablets with new tablets, legacy devices with new devices, and the different permutations of operating systems.
So if I have a native application, how many devices that works on Android and iOS, how many devices minimum do I need to run in order to feel that I'm covered 80% of the market? So in US?
In the US. So it will be, again, when I'm doing a lot of workshops with customers today, I'm trying to get, if possible, and it's not always possible, some analytics from the customer because they are seeing usage through the web coming from different mobile devices. So I will merge the customer analytics with what I'm seeing, with the usage reports that I'm reviewing, and it usually varies between 10 to 20 devices. That's I would say, the 80% coverage. But that's not enough. I will tell you why. Because this will give you the 80% usage in the market, which might be enough for you. What it won't give you is the long tail. That's the extended here, the remaining 7 devices. And what is included in these devices? It's including the latest and greatest trending devices. These are devices which are just popping up, like the Samsung S9, just announced in Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, the S9 Plus. Okay, these devices are undergoing a great buzz. No one actually testing on them. Perfecto just last week announced support for these devices. They are in the cloud, okay? And we are starting to see like a hype around this new next generation Samsungs, but this will fall here in the extended. Obviously, usage reports, analytics from the customer won't see these devices, at least not like in the 2 or 4% usage that they are seeing other devices.
Oh, those devices are very important because those devices always adopted by the more the people in the market that have more money, that they are
that's a demographic conversation.
Yeah, they generate more transaction that provide money to you, the enterprise. This is why your application must work on those devices as well.
And these devices may replace, the legacy S5, the S6. So obviously you want at least to start getting experience with these devices, but it won't be a huge business risk for you if you postpone by a month or 2 testing on these devices. This is why they are in the report, they are in the recommendation, but they will be like in the extended, they are just growing the trend, the momentum. So going back to your question, yeah, I would say around 20 devices. This will give you the good UX coverage, the risk coverage of the market in a global way.
What happens if I have responsive web application?
I think that you have seen my next slide, and this is what you're asking. So When you're talking about responsive web, unfortunately, it's a combination of both mobile devices and desktop browsers. I think the plot thickens and it becomes a bit more complicated because, from one hand, most of the traffic is coming from mobile, even for web applications. People are on the move and they are experiencing the responsive website from the mobile in a different viewport. When you're switching to the desktop web, there is a consistent, I would say, trend, mostly by Google and Mozilla Firefox, that are updating the desktop browsers on a monthly basis. And you can go, you don't need to take my word for it, go to the wiki, to the schedule from Google Chrome, from Mozilla Firefox. You will see the upcoming releases up until December of 2018. If you are bored or you don't have the time, it's in factors. We included 2 calendars for web and for mobile throughout the year. It will give you the changes that are expected. But to your question, Uzi, we see as a fundamental requirement for responsive web, the previous slide, the top 10, top 25, and top 32 devices, this will cover the mobile, the smartphones, the tablets of the world. If you want to include for responsive also the desktop browsers, this is what we recommend. We recommend the 9 Firefox combinations. You have all the details in the Factors magazine. I won't go one by one. We've provided a very prescriptive and detailed recommendation there. You have the most coverages for Chrome, because Chrome can run both on Mac and on Windows. You start to see Windows 7, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, different Mac, at least the 2 last generations, and you then want to test on the latest Chrome and one at least before and the next beta. So you have 3 permutations of Chrome that you cannot really avoid because there is a different adoption curve for Chrome and for Firefox, by the way. People sometimes take a week, 2 weeks. Sometimes they put it on auto-update for their Chrome. You can't control that. You need to be on top of things. You need to support at least some of our customers actually claim to support the latest 10 browser versions. This is why in Perfecto, we have both mobile cloud and web cloud. The web cloud actually supports the latest 10 browsers for all vendors. We're talking about Mozilla, IE, Edge, Safari, and Chrome. So that's my recommendation. Combine both mobile and web coverage guidelines and methodologies, form factors. This is the permutations that we recommend. If you want to drill down into how this was developed, it's in Factors. It's a free download. You can go ahead and download it. So with that intro to Factors, I'm sorry, let's drill down into the most important aspect of this webinar, and that's the coverage throughout the DevOps pipeline. And I intentionally put the word process in this slide. The DevOps pipeline, some can think about it as a pipeline. It's a process. It's a continuous activity that goes on and on by both developers, testers, PO, PMs for each product that is being shipped to the market. And these teams are trying to accomplish one thing, to release value to their end users as fast as possible with the greatest coverage, both from a testing perspective as well as platform perspective. What we have done here, we try to segment. Obviously, there can be in between these phases more detailed activities, API testing and alpha testing. You can put some other phases in between. We try to put it like in 4 different buckets. One of them is the unit testing. That's the most initial phase of the DevOps. This is when the developers are committing their code. Either they are fixing a bug, they are implementing a new feature or a partial feature, and they are doing code commit. Pre-commit, that's the trigger here, they want to make sure that this minor change, simple change, did not disrupt the entire activities, the entire work. It simply works. That's the unit testing. That's a very basic and fast test. They want to get fast feedback on a very limited amount of platforms. This is when they will test against, here we recommend at least 1 iOS device or emulator, 1 Android device or emulator, and 2 desktop browsers if we are talking about responsive web. So as you can see, this is a very limited activity, limited coverage to provide back to the developer workstation. That's where it's happening. Fast feedback, pass, fail, go, no go.
And the role of this test is just to make sure that the developer didn't break anything, and all the other teams will be able to continue to work on their work or on the next test. And when we're talking about the other team, the other developer will be able to continue and integrate with his new code. And the tester, when they're going to start to test the application, they will be able to do more advanced testing on his code, and it's not going to break the application. One more important thing that you have to remember about unit test going to test only the functions that have been created, added, changes. What we have in the unit test is actually we control the data input, we control the output, we are not connecting to the database, we are not connecting to anything in the application. So it's just to make that the simple functions that added work and doesn't break something critical.
It's simple white box, limited test to get fast feedback. And the testing is done from a developer workstation locally, pre and post commit. Before he's making the change and after he's making the change, to make sure that everything is green. He didn't kill anything, and his change are committed properly and work. Then it becomes a bit more complicated. When we are shifting to the build acceptance testing, you have a superset of tests here. You are taking the P1, the unit, the white box testing, and you add more functional test activities here. And for that, you need to increase your test coverage. You want to understand how things work together, how they impact one another. You want to test both mobile and web in maybe different environments, and this is done on a daily basis. This takes a bit more time. It cannot happen, multiple times per day. It's done once a day, and usually it will be triggered through the continuous integration server. It's part of the Jenkins or Bamboo or whatever CI solution that is being used by the organization. It will be triggered on a daily basis, kind of an integration test, and that's what is being done both by the developers and testers. When you're shifting to the acceptance test, that's the full regression, including non-functional testing. You want to extend your test coverage. You want to run on, going back to what Uzi asked, the 80% coverage. You want to make sure that you are good to go. We are talking here about teams that are in DevOps, are running fast. They have a sprint of 1 week, 2 weeks. They don't have time. And this is done also over the night. You have like 8 hours a night. You run on the entire set of platforms in one shot, the full regression test. Finally, you have production. You want to make sure that in production nothing is breaking, and you have the threshold, the performance, everything works fine. Talking about network condition, as Uzi mentioned earlier, this is you want to have a limited amount of platforms here, 2 iOS, 2 Android, 2 to 4 different desktop browsers, just to keep the lights on, to make sure that everything runs seamlessly in production, whether in peak hours or in normal activities. So that's, I'd say, the prescription that we recommend from a desktop and mobile platform coverage perspective. Now, before we are shifting to Uzi, talking about which tools fit in each of these phases, let's run a very quick poll to see what tools are you using online, what tool stack you are using for your test automation throughout the entire DevOps pipeline. And we are giving here few names that we are seeing widely adopted in the market, including Espresso, XCUI test, unit test and headless browser testing, API testing, Appium. So what kind of tools are you using, guys, for your unit testing, for your functional acceptance testing, maybe production monitoring? We provided here also an other option. So if you have tools that are not listed here and you want to share them with us, we'd love to see them. And Uzi, what I'm seeing already, I see Appium for mobile, Selenium for web as one of the leading tools, but we're also seeing 11% and still changing of tools that were built inside the organization. Do you have any idea why would people build their own tools within the organization?
Some of the tools will have them too, but it's going down. But this is what I think. on some feature, when you have a unique tools, when you have a unique feature, you need specific implementation. And in this case, you build something on top of this. It always will be part of the main Selenium Appium. That's what I'm seeing here. The other is very important. If I will be able to get the names there, that can be interesting. So if you mention other, please specify the name in the chat so we can talk about it.
Cool. So obviously the leading tools are either Appium for mobile, Selenium for web. We see a bunch of others, but we also see Espresso and XUI test, which is cool because we are going to touch on them very soon. So thank you guys online for participating. Let's move on. And Uzi, to you now. We talked about which platforms. Let's try to see which tools fit in the DevOps pipeline.
Okay, so what I want to do now is to drill down into the pipeline conversations that we had. So let's define, this is a very important slide, and it defined everything that's needed. So on the below of the line, what we have the actions. What is the code? What is the build locally? This is the pre-commit. This is the commit. And we also have the persona. Who is the guy that runs it? You have to remember, in the pipeline, we have different people that executed automated tests. More and more developers create more tests. Dev tools, dev tests, or DevOps, they started to create more automation processes. So the automation is across the pipeline. So let's talk about the slide. So we have the web and the mobile. Web means that we have responsive web, we have applications that works on browser, and mobile is native application. So let's talk about the first thing. When I'm committing on the first thing, during my coding, when I write the code of the application, when I'm running my test, I'm running the unit test. It always will run locally. Sometimes it can run in part of my CI, but it's going to run very, very fast. It must be unattended, and it must give a fast feedback. And then, if it's passed and the unit test passed, I can commit the code. By the way, when I'm saying commit the code, I also saying commit the test. You have to remember that the tests today are code. You need to treat them as a code. After that, I want to build locally. I'm getting all of the elements from my my other people that develop, and I build it locally. I want to build the full version locally. But after I build it locally, I want to see that everything works here. So here what I need to do, I need to run more advanced testing, not only my unit test, but also if I'm a mobile developer, I would like to run my Espresso and XUI test. Few words about XUI test and Espresso. These are a new, it's always a year there, test platform developed by Apple and Google to test iPhone and Android. And it's really white box options to run tests on your code when you have the code and the test running together on the devices. I will show you a demo about that. And then, if you have a web application, in this case, what you want to do, you want to run something right, something fast. So I would use Lighthouse or PPT, which are headless browsers, and also an API testing. And then, before I commit everything run, I want to commit the code. What I need to do, I want to run it in the cloud. I want to run it on real devices. So it was really nice when I run everything locally. But before I committed, and why it's important, because after this commit, this code going to use other teams, other processes. So I must make sure that it works not only on my emulator or works not only on my local device. I want to run it on the cloud. And we mentioned small. Small means 2 devices, 2 Android, 2 iOS, 2 to 4 browsers. This is what you need to run your test on. And that's it. And then you will be able to commit the code. After you commit the code, you will, as a developer, you will continue to loop over these processes. But the other team, the DevOps team, will start to run their own testing. And the testing will be Selenium and Espresso. And also, they will be able to use your XUI test and Appium. So in this case, what we want is to run it again, to add only Espresso and Selenium, but also also Appium and Selenium test here. And what we want to do is to run it on large number of devices and to add the wind tunnel. Wind tunnel is the network condition. I want to run it on 10 devices. I want to run on 5 devices with a bad network, for example. And then, before I deploy, I want to run my full regression. This is the full coverage. I want to make sure that it works. I want to make sure that after I run those tests, I understand what is my current state. And this test will be the same test that I used here, but here the coverage will be bigger. I'm going to run it on all the cloud. I want to run it on 30 devices. I want to run the new devices and the old devices together. And at the end, during the production, I would like to run some monitoring. These are the tests that Eran just made.
Cool.
So let's talk a little bit about developers, and let's start with our demos. So developers, we mentioned, they want to use their XUI test and Espresso. They want to run it from their standard environment. They want, if they're working a web, they want to have some headless browsers. And let's see how does it work on a different environment. So let's start with...
You want me, was it just give a short explanation about Lighthouse? And then
so let's start with the local execution, Lighthouse, and Puppeteer. So you can see the green definition under the location. So we are going to run the local browser test on local machines.
Cool. So what we are seeing today in the market, we are seeing the following. We are seeing progressive web applications becoming more and more popular, mostly driven by Google and Mozilla, but in iOS 11.3, which is just around the corner, Apple is also going to introduce support within Safari for these progressive web applications. These are apps that can behave more like native mobile applications. For that, going back to the pipeline, you want to do very local, fast, automated test cases. Google for that and Apple are providing similar tools. Provided a tool called Lighthouse. I was executing this tool on AliExpress. That's a shopping progressive web application. To get this report, you can see very fast. It took like 3 minutes to execute, or even less, to execute on the entire website of AliExpress to get both performance, progressive, failed audits. You get very fast feedback into your local machine without really setting up a grid, without setting up a very complex environment. And by the way, you have this plugin here. You can choose what kind of tests you want to do. You can audit just the progressive side of the site. You can add performance, accessibility, SEO, which is also important. So you can check different aspects of the website. And, Google as the leading tools behind progressive provides you in the application panel, if you can see my screen here, both the ability to enable and disable service workers, to enable you to test different network connectivity issues, offline modes, and other mobile-specific push notifications and stuff. So that's just a very basic example of how Lighthouse, as a free tool, you can also use Puppeteer as a headless browser, works to give you fast feedback.
So maybe I'll show you a script in Puppeteer, and let's drill down into some code.
Sure.
So I'm about to share my screen. So this is the Puppeteer code. What we have here, again, it's a JavaScript code. It's a library that added from Google. And what I did here, I just added it into my lib environment. And what I'm going here, I'm going into the Gecko. And the way that I'm creating the automations are in 2 layers. First of all, I can interact with any element on the screen. So if I have the ID, I use the ID. And if I want to use an XPath, I can use an XPath, or I can use a class. So all of the standard ways that the JavaScript connect with my element on the DOM, on the document, is something that I can use it. But there is another layer. There is the layer of the environment. So by defining a configuration of screen size, I can change the screen size. And if I want to see how does it run on a mobile, I can say, okay, this is a mobile application. All I need to do is to define the screen parameters and add it or set it into my page. That's it. That's the only thing that I want to do. So the test itself runs most of the time headless, without to see anything. What I did here, I just add the headless false because I want you to see what happened on the screen. And in this case, it's going to be a standard test that you have today. So you can see here, I'm changing. I open it on the big screen, change it to the small screen, and enter some value. You saw that it's been executed very, very fast, and it gave me a really fast feedback. So that was the
Google Puppeteer.
Google Puppeteer. One more comment here. If you want to drill down and get all the links in the page or all the elements, it's something that's very easy to get. It's a very, very powerful tool, very developer-oriented. It doesn't give you verification that everything runs end-to-end. It's not a full functional testing, but it gives you a good understanding about if your feature is actually stable enough. So,
and while you're loading Espresso, the Puppeteer also integrates with the Google DevTools as well, so you can actually get some more insights from the DevTool, like performance, how files and such things, also through Puppeteer, but that's if you want to get advanced feedback.
So now I moved into my native application environment. I open Android Studio, and this is my test, and this is my code. So I have my code. This is a very simple bank application. It just gives me login and give me my balance. So what you can see here, I created few tests. How to have login which should pass. I enter the user and password and verifies that everything is okay. I enter invalid user and password and verify that I got an error. And I also checking my balance. I enter into the page and verify that my balance equals 4,203. And the way that I want to execute, in this case, I want to execute those scripts or those tests on real devices. If I want to run it on emulator, I need to run it from here. If I want to run it on Perfecto, I'm going to build my code. I integrated, or Perfecto Mobile allow you to integrate it directly with Gradle. So what I have here, I'm running a Gradle build. I'm running build number 87. And what happened behind the scenes, build number 107. And what happened behind the scenes, the code is actually compiled, sent into the cloud, and you can see immediately one Android Pixel and one Galaxy open. And what you can see here is that the script is about to run on both of those. The script will be about to run on both of the devices. The Pixel is faster, so it started before. And we have the test that runs on the devices. And immediately I can get the results into my dashboard. So I'm a developer. Everything is in my environment, in my IDE. But you have to remember, it's not enough. I have a problem here. I have errors. First of all, I don't want, if I have 100 test cases and 20 devices, I don't want to go over all the lines and make sure that everything's passed. I need to have a strong reporting system. So I want to show you our reporting system. And I'm going into my reporting system. If you remember, I started as a dashboard. I started as a build. So I'm starting to my CI dashboard because I connected it to my CI dashboard. And this is the build that I have. Let me refresh it. And this is the build number 107. So I can drill down into my build in order to see all my tests. And what I can see is that I executed 8 tests. And I got 2 errors. And the errors was in the check balance. So let's drill down into the check balance and try to understand what happened. So if you remember, we wanted to validate that I have $4,203 in my account, but it tells me that I have 500 and 100.
It's good news.
Good news, not a bug. That's what we wanted. But if I'm a developer, I need to understand what happened. What happened? Does I got the wrong data from the server? Did something with the my request? So what I'm doing here, I'm just drill down. I download the HAR file. HAR file is the HTTP archive data. It's what happened. It shows me exactly what happened when I executed my test in the network. What was the HTTP call, what was the call, and what was the request. So I'm about to open it in Charles Proxy, and what you can see here that was my call. I go to my backend server, and I'm asked for the value, and if I would like to get the specific content, I can see that this is my request, and my response was 230. So this is the value that I got. So I actually send the value. This is the value that we remember. I actually sent a request and got an error value. So the problem is it's not in my application, but in the integration with my backend server. So that was one thing that I want to show you, how to run espresso test in the cloud and be able to get the report. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's move to a different persona. So we talked about the developer, we talked about Lighthouse, Puppeteer, Espresso, XUI test falls in the same bucket, instrumented tests for white box testing and fast feedback. Now we're moving a bit to the right of the DevOps pipeline. We're looking at higher scale, higher test coverage, and that's the dev test DevOps persona, and he has a different objective, right? He has different requirements from a test coverage perspective. Just to name a few things that are important here in the slide, Uzi.
Parallel
execution, you want to scale things, you want to get coverage results and insights coming from different platforms, so that's one thing. I think, and that's what we're going to see here, and by the way, the guys online also voted, you are using different tools, right? Why? You're using Appium and Selenium. Appium for mobile, Selenium for web. Why? Because you want to test different aspects of the application. You want to get full system control. You want to get full environment activities, more visual related stuff. So you want to extend your test coverage and run more in parallel, and Espresso and XUI test serve a different purpose than Appium and Selenium. Actually, Appium and Selenium complement the frameworks that we have just demonstrated.
Exactly. It's very important to mention. It's not one tool. It's all of the tools.
The tool stack.
Each tools need to be used in a different phase of your testing or of your pipeline.
Yeah. So what we are going to drill down, we talked about the dev, we talked about the test, we talked about different tools and automation at scale. Let's now look at how an automation at scale looks like, from a lab and CI perspective. And just remember, we are now talking about the cloud, we're talking about continuous integration and running in parallel at scale.
Okay, so what I have here, I have a different test. This is IntelliJ. It looks like Android Studio, but it's not. And this is more environment to create my automation for the web.
Yeah.
Appium, Selenium. What you can see here, I'm going into the target. I'm looking for a coffee machine, and I just want to verify. I'm scrolling down, and I want to verify that I got everything that's needed. Cool. One important comment here, I'm using an environment or framework called Quantum. It's an open source released by Perfecto Mobile, and it's really helped me to create a very simple automation. So what you can see here, I don't need to start the driver. All I need to do is get driver, use the get driver application, and I have the driver available for me. So I'm about to run my test. And what I want to do, I want to run it on a lot of devices. I want to run it on my Pixel, and on my other Android device. I want to run it on iOS devices. I want to run it on Chrome. I want to run it on Firefox. I want to run it on the latest Chrome. So you can see I defined a lot of tests that I would like.
It's like a digital lab.
Digital lab. And what I'm doing right now, I'm about to run all my tests. Okay, let's run it. So what happened right now, I'm about to run the test on all of the devices. You can see all of the driver opens together. If I'm going to the cloud, to the dashboard, you will see that all the devices already are in use. So let me open that. And we are going to target. So we are going to target.com. We are looking for the coffee machines. And what you can see here is that we are entering coffee machine, and this is the result. And then we are about to scroll and get the results. In this case, it runs on iOS, Android. If I'm going into the report, you can see that it's already ended. 1 second, let me. It's already ended on the browsers, and now it's about to be ended on the browser itself. So I have the test runs on the Chrome, on the Firefox, and now it runs on the real devices. So it's about to end it on all of the real devices in a second. And the moment that we'll wait, that it will end, we'll get all the results here. So what I want to see how does it look on all of the different devices. So we talked a little bit about visual validation. So let me group it by the name. And I can go here and see how does it look on all of my devices. So I'm getting this device, and this device, and this device, this device, and I'm about to compare it. And immediately I can see how does my application look on all of the devices. And you can see that it looks very good. I don't have a problem. I have one script that I executed on all of the devices without a problem. Another thing that I want to show you is that I executed like 3 times lately, but I want to go to the last 7 days. And in the last 7 days, I can see that I have 4% of errors. So let me show you how, as a manager, I can do the right decision. So I can drill down here, and I can see that I have on mobile some errors. And if I drill down to a specific errors, I can see that, let me show it to you, the bug. So when I'm writing a coffee machine, the autocomplete doesn't work for me. You can see here I'm writing the coffee machine and the autocomplete doesn't work for me.
It's truncated, yeah.
Yeah. So I understand it immediately that I have a bug that happens, and let's return to the heat map. I'm the manager right now, and I know that it happened on 7 to 8% of all of my execution. So I know that I have around 8% error, or even less. Sorry about that. So I have 5% error on my execution. I know it happened only on web, only on mobile, and then I can decide to take my decision. Do I want to release my application? Yes, because most of my users arrive from web and I don't care about it. Or no, 5% of all the transactions, and most of the transactions arrive from the web, so I do want to stop it. But this heatmap report allows me to get the right decision based on all of the execution.
So just to summarize, what we've seen here, we've seen not just a large execution at scale, we have seen it running from the CI as it will run from within the DevOps pipeline. We have seen tracking of a build running this execution at scale in progress, and a drill down into a specific issue with pinpointing the exact problem, giving the decision maker a go no go decision based on the business objective. So that's awesome. So with that, Uzi, I think that's the content that we wanted to deliver. There are plenty of questions. Some of them we are able to answer, but with a few minutes left, let's move into the questions. While we are addressing the questions, you can download the latest factors report, edition 9, from the link on the screen. It can be also shared through the webinar recording as well. But that's the free guide that you can get and learn more about the coverage, the pipeline, and everything that we have discussed during this webinar. So Josh, do we have any high priority questions that we have time to address now?
We absolutely do. And like you mentioned, we'll send this full list your way, Eran and Uzi, so you can answer some of these offline. Let's get to one or two now before we're done. This person wants to know, how do you determine how far back in legacy OS versions we should test?
So that's a good question. Basically, you have a few ways of addressing that question. One of them is based on your analytics. You know, there are different users for different applications from different verticals. If you, as a user, as a business analyst, see that you have a lot of users coming from, as Uzi mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, Android 4.2. So regardless to the market share Android 4.2 has at this point, you cannot really avoid testing on that platform. So it's a mix of both market analytics, usage analytics, and where the market is at this point. Another consideration is your backlog, history, and defects that you see. If you have seen that many bugs happening on the Android 4.x or 5.x family, I would continue addressing this until this family becomes lower adopted in the market. So it's not just one simple answer, yes or no. It's a set of considerations based on market share, operating system share, and defect backlog that you have against this platform.
I read a lot of questions regarding the pipelines that we have and the number. You have to remember, this is a suggestion. If it's a process, but it doesn't fit everyone. If you don't have an espresso and you want to run Appium before, yes, it's important. It's important. The most important thing that you have to remember about the pipeline, before every step, before you are moving from the commit to the production, before you are moving from your commit into the pre-production, or before you are running the regression, you need to run some tests. The number of tests related to the phase of the gate, and the coverage, the number of devices, is again, how far are you in the pipeline. Yeah. At the end of the pipeline, you want to run all of your tests, Espresso and XUI tests, Appium or Selenium, all of them or just one of them, on all of the devices with the different win time. And I just got a lot of questions regarding that, and I want to mention that it can be changed, and it's not a fixed methodology.
All right, perfect.
Any more?
Like you said, there are a lot of questions about the pipeline itself, and those can be answered offline. We have about 2 more minutes, so I can do one more. This person wants to know, I see desktop browser being placed under unit testing. What kind of unit tests can be run on a browser?
So if you run your browser, so let's say that you have a UI test, and you create a lot of UI, but you don't have the backend server, you want to run the unit test immediately to make sure that all of the elements that added works on the device regarding the UI base. Remember, if you're running your JavaScript, you want to make it sure that it works before you commit it, and you don't have to set the backend server. So that's one thing. So a lot of unit tests can make sure that the UI that's been written in the JavaScript and HTTP actually works.
And another example, and it was actually part of my short demo with Lighthouse. Lighthouse can be considered as a very basic fast feedback unit testing. Even though you don't write any code, you allow Google to scan your application, your website, even if it's like a very early stage, and give you some recommendations on the accessibility, performance, network, and things like that. Uzi showed you Puppeteer. Puppeteer is a very cool tool running either headless browsers or with the browser, some unit testing as well.
All right, perfect. And that ends our event for today. I'd like to thank our speakers, Eran and Uzi, for their time. I'd like to thank Perfecto for sponsoring this event. Also, a special thank you goes out to you, the audience, for spending the last hour with us. Have a great day. We hope to see you at a future event.